This is a story about a police training cadet taking an exam at Hendon Police Training College in northwest London. The recruits are seated and the exam supervisor says, "You may start." Turning over her paper, the recruit sees the first question, which reads like this. "You are proceeding down the high street when you notice a woman with her child at the window of a third-floor apartment in some distress as smoke is pouring out of the building. You're about to radio for help when you notice a truck is careering out of control down the hill towards a group of school children crossing the road. You're just about to speak into your radio when you see three young men on the corner attacking an elderly lady and stealing her handbag. As you're calling for backup, you notice a group of City fans and a group of United fans converging on each other on the opposite corner. And the question was, what would you do?" The recruit thought about this for a moment, picked up her pen and wrote, "Remove uniform and mingle with crowd." Stress is rarely about one thing. We can cope if it's one thing, but when multiple things combine together and we start to feel overwhelmed, that's when we feel in trouble. These things that I'm talking about are called stressors, and when they come at us from all directions, it can feel like you're trapped in some sort of perfect storm. There is a well-known story in the New Testament of the Bible, at least it's well known if you've heard it before, when Jesus of Nazareth and his friends get to the end of a long, tiring day and they decide to take a boat trip on a piece of water called the Sea of Galilee. He says to them, "Let's go over to the other side," and off they go. Now remember, this lake was a workplace for the majority of the people in the boat who were fishermen. So you can apply this story to your work as well as your life. A massive storm whips down the valley and stirs up the water. Jesus is asleep. His friends are exasperated and overwhelmed with multiple stresses. Rain is pouring down from above. In your life, you might have an employer, a boss, the government, a teacher or a parent who is making demands on you, and it's like rain coming down on your head. Wind is swirling in from the side. You may have friends, colleagues, customers or clients, team members, brothers and sisters pressurizing you, and it feels like wind knocking you over. Floods are coming up from beneath. Perhaps you have employees, children, responsibilities, or people who report to you, and it feels like floodwaters rising in your life. Jesus' friends work harder and fail. They are angry and exhausted. Remember, they're supposed to know what they're doing. It's their patch. So they wake up their team leader, who is asleep on the job. Spoiler alert, he calms the storm. But then he turns to them and asks them a question. Where is your faith? He's asking, why didn't you bring your faith with you onto the lake? Or even, why didn't you bring your faith to work? Let me suggest to you why he asked this question, so you can get some help with your many stressors and pressures. First, they didn't listen to what he'd already said. He had said, "Let's go over to the other side." If I say, "Let's go over to the other side," we may or may not make it. But when he says, "Let's go over to the other side," they're going to get over to the other side. There are many things that Jesus has already said, like, "Don't worry," or "Your Father knows what you need," or "If you believe in me, even though you die, you will live again," and 100 other things which, if we listen, tell us we're going to make it, even in the face of death. Second, they forgot that Jesus' presence in the boat was their guarantee that they would not sink. It was no guarantee that they would have an easy time. In my experience, it's often a guarantee that I will have a hard time. But for them to sink, he would have to sink. And there was no way Jesus of Nazareth was going to drown that day. He was going to die, but at a time and place of his choosing. When Jesus of Nazareth is in your life, his very presence is your guarantee that you will not be destroyed. Because for you to be destroyed, he would have to be destroyed as well. And that's just not going to happen. And of course, they forgot that he had the power to deal with the very issue that they were facing. Sometimes we can forget that Jesus is an expert and can solve the very specific modern problems that we face in our current workplaces and lives. I wonder if you've ever doubted that Jesus could help with an IT problem. There were no computers around in his time, no software glitches, so no point in asking for help with that. I could tell you many stories of people who've spoken to me about ways in which Jesus has calmed the storm in their workplace by fixing an IT problem or an accounting issue. Here was a carpenter dealing with a fisherman's problem, but he's also able to deal with your problem. His words can echo into your stressed soul. We're going over to the other side. I am with you in the boat. I have the power to calm storms. Or to summarize, peace, be still. There's a PS in this story. Have you ever reached a point in the day where you thought it could never get worse? When these friends of Jesus finally got the boat over to the other side, a crazy man meets them. He's full of mental illness and a spiritual kind of madness. He's well known in the area, lives amongst the gravestones and self-harms regularly. After a conversation of struggle with Jesus, the man is healed, and whatever is possessing him enters a 2,000 strong herd of pigs who rush down the hillside into the water. His friends are terrified. The people of the area asked him to leave. The man asked if he can go with Jesus, but Jesus says, no, go back and tell everyone what I've done for you. End of the story? Not quite. 4 chapters later, in this record we call Mark's Gospel, we find Jesus feeding 5,000 men, probably a crowd of around 15,000, including women and children. They've been with him for 3 days. Where are they? They're in the same part of the world called the 10 Towns, where they met the crazy man in the gravestones. Instead of asking Jesus to leave, they are with him for 3 days. Where did this crowd come from? Well, the man that Jesus had set free had done as he was asked, gone back and told everyone great things that had happened to him. Now rewind to the beginning of the story and go into the mind of Jesus. And he was saying, I'm going to take my disciples onto the lake, teach them lessons of faith, calm the storm, deal with the darkness behind the storm, set a man free in the gravestones, send him back to his people to prepare the way for us to return to bring my message to 15,000. And all he said to his friends was, let us go over to the other side. There are times when you can think God is not giving you enough information, but that is because you are part of a bigger picture. Some of our stress comes from believing that we are center stage in our own story, but Jesus tells us that we are supporting actors in his story and invites us to enjoy the show.